In this lesson, we're going to be talking about slope-intercept form of a linear equation. So this begins our different forms of what a line looks like. And this is the first out of the 3 different forms that I'm going to show you this year. So the slope-intercept form is given by the formula you see to the right. It's in the form y equals mx plus b. We've been working with a lot of equations that look like this year, but I haven't really said that it was specifically called slope-intercept form. So in this form, you can see that we already know what the variable m means. That's going to be our slope. And then this new piece is the b. The b is going to represent where the graph is going to cross the y-axis, called the y-intercept. So let's go ahead and just use this information below to see if we can put this information into slope-intercept form. You can see the first one says that the slope is 4 and the y-intercept is -2. So to put this information into slope-intercept form, it's going to look like this. Y is equal to my slope x minus my y-intercept. So that's it. Y equals 4x minus 2. You can see that the x and the y are going to remain as variables, and the only thing I'm really going to be plugging in is the number for the slope and the y-intercept. Now what this means is, this is going to be a graph that is going to cross the y-intercept at -2, and it's going to have a slope of 4. I'm going to show you that a little bit later when we graph it. All right, here's another example. This time they give me a point, 0, 3, and then a slope of -1/2. This is a little tricky because you have to kind of think about the point. Isn't this point the y-intercept? Isn't, whenever, we talked about this when we talked about intercepts, when the x value is 0, doesn't that give me the y-intercept? So therefore, that's going to be an equation of y equals my slope of -1/2 x plus 3, and it's plus 3 because it's a positive 3. That y-intercept is on the positive y-axis. And that is how you put it together. All right, let's go ahead and talk about, now let's look at it graphically here. So here I have some pictures of some graphs, and now we're going to figure out what's the slope-intercept form of the equation of this line. So what we need to know the slope and the y-intercept. So I usually like to do this. I'd like to actually write it down. So my slope equals, and then my y-intercept equals. So let's go ahead and figure out the slope. The slope of the first one, I can see if I start at this point, it's going to be 3 over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 3 divided by 6 is going to be 1/2. So that's my slope. My b, which is my y-intercept, is going to be this point right here, which is -1. This is going to give me an equation of y equals 1/2 x minus 1. So this right here is the equation of the line above. Let's try the next one. All right, I first need to figure out my slope. So I need a slope, and then I need a y-intercept. My slope, let's see, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go down 4, so -4 over +3. So -4/3 is my slope. My y-intercept happens to be this guy right here, which is going to be -2. So my equation is going to be y equals -4/3 x minus 2. All right, and the last one here, let's go ahead and look at this. My slope and my y-intercept is what we need. So my slope is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 over 1, which is going to be 4. And then my y-intercept is actually at the origin, which is 0. That's going to give me a very special type of equation, which we're going to talk about in the next lesson. But this equation is going to be y equals 4x. Now I'm not going to go ahead and put plus 0 because that's kind of silly, right? We don't want to write plus 0 there. We're just going to write the full equation of y equals 4x. All right, what happens when you have special graphs like the ones with 0 slope and the ones with a horizontal slope? So we know that this first one is an undefined slope, and we know that the second has a 0 slope, but how do you write the equation of the line? Now, anytime that you have a situation that looks like this, you have these, I like to call them special graphs. The equations are always going to be the same. Let me show you what I mean. The equation of the first one here is going to be x equals 1. Here's y. Well, actually not y, but here's a trick to remember y. So if you look at the line here, don't you see that the line is a vertical line? So in the letter x, you have all of these little v's. And V stands for vertical. So that's going to help you remember that this is going to be a vertical line. Now I'm going to get the answer of 1 because it crosses my x-axis at 1. Therefore, giving me that equation of x equals 1. I know it's not in the form y equals mx plus b, but this is a special graph, and it only has one equation, and this is it. Likewise, you can see that I have a horizontal line, or a zero slope for this second one. This is going to be an answer of y equals 1. It's 1 because you can see it's crossing the y-axis at 1. If it were to cross up here, it would be y equals 4. Now, how are we going to remember this? This is my little trick. Hopefully this helps you. If you flip the y upside down, it kind of looks like an H, right? And H is for horizontal. So hopefully that helps you remember that this is going to give you the equation y equals something. All right, we're going to talk about those special graphs as we learn all the forms of these equations. So don't forget that little trick I showed you. All righty, now let's go ahead and graph. This is the fun part. Here's my first equation, and it's given to me in slope-intercept form. You can see by this first one here, I have a slope of 2. And I have a y-intercept of -3. I like to write that out just so I remember it. The way that you graph it is you begin with your y-intercept. I'm going to go ahead and put a point at that y-intercept because I know that that is going to be where it crosses the x-axis. Now I'm going to find a slope of 2. Now, if you remember correctly, slope is going to break into the idea of a rise over a run. So I need to take that 2 and I need to make it a rational number or a fraction, giving me my rise of 2 and my run of 1. So I'm going to rise 2 and then I'm going to run 1. That's going to give me the slope of my line. Now I'm not going to stop there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to continue that slope all the way off of my graph. So I'm going to go rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. Rise 2, run 1. And I even have 1 on the other side. I'm going to rise -2, run -1, and that's going to create my line. I would like you to plot all of the points whenever you're plotting this. So now let's go ahead and draw our nice straight line with our arrows at the end, indicating that this is a linear equation that goes on forever. Okay, now let's try the next one. In this example, my slope is going to be -2/3 x. Not x, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to write that there. I was looking at the x and I wrote it. Slope does not include that variable x. Slope is just the number that's in front of it. My y-intercept is just going to be 1. So now that I have that information, let's go ahead and graph the y-intercept. I'm going to put a 1 right there. And my slope is -2/3. So I'm going to go down 2 and then I'm going to go to the right 3. You can see that I can't continue that pattern going on to the right side because it'll take me off the graph. But I can go in the other direction. So I'm going to rise 2 and I'm going to run -3. And that's going to give me my nice line. I wish I could have drew that a little bit straighter. Sorry about that. All right, just to double check myself, I just want to see that my slope is a negative number. So I should have a slope that is negative visually, which I do. And that's how you graph. Now let's talk about some more neat concepts. Now I like to call this unique method the camel method. I know that sounds silly, but I do have my reasons why. And the reason basically is later on throughout the school year, we're going to be using this exact concept and I want to be able to refer to it. So some of my students in the past said, well, give it a name, maybe a cute little animal. So they picked a camel. And so we usually just say it's the camel method and everybody's able to associate that with this concept. So hopefully it works for you. So it says determine the linear equation. This time I'm given a point and I'm given a slope. So I'm trying to figure out what is the y equals mx plus b formula or equation given this information? The information I'm given is that this is the point and this is the slope and it's on the graph. What's the equation that goes with it? Here's how you do it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use that equation, y equals mx plus b. That's my slope-intercept form of my linear equation. Now I'm going to figure out, well, I know what my slope is, right? Aren't I given this slope above? I'm also given an x and I'm given a y, which is also part of my formula. Let's go ahead and substitute the 3 variables that we know into our formula to solve for the fourth. So I'm going to say negative 3 is equal to 1/2 times x, which is negative 6, plus b, since I don't know what b is yet. And then I'm going to simplify it down and solve for b. Negative 3 equals negative 3 plus b. I'm going to go ahead and simplify it down. So therefore, b is equal to 0. So now I have a slope and I have a y-intercept. So I can construct my linear equation as y equals 1/2 x. Let's go ahead and do that again. I did change it up just slightly here. This time I want to know what is the slope-intercept form of the linear equation given 2 points. Well, now I'm not given a slope, so I can't solve it exactly the way that I did before, but I am given 2 points which can create a slope, right? Remember the slope formula? M equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We're going to go ahead and use that formula to figure out a slope. So here's my x1, y1, x2, y2. And I'm going to go ahead and first solve for my slope. So 0 minus 2, and then 4 minus negative 4 gives me negative 2 over 8, which gives me negative 1/4. So my slope is negative 1/4. I'm going to write that here. Okay, I'm given that information now, and I need a point. Well, luckily, they give me 2 points above. I can go ahead and use either one that I want to use my camel method. I'm going to go ahead and use the second one because I love it when there's zeros in there because it cancels numbers out. So y equals mx plus b. That's the formula. Let's go ahead and plug in what I know. I'm going to use that point 40. And that 40 is going to give me an x and a y. So here we go. 0 equals negative 1/4 times my x of 4 plus b. That's going to give me 0 equals negative 1 plus b. Simplify it down. B is equal to 1. Now I have a slope and a y-intercept. So my slope is negative 1/4 and my b is 1, giving me the equation y equals negative 1/4 x plus 1. And that is the slope-intercept form of this linear equation. You can see that the work is starting to pile up. You want to make sure that you're nice and neat and organized as you're working through your problems. All right, I think I have one more thing here for you today, and then we'll be done with this lesson. It says, write the equation below in slope-intercept form. What we're going to be getting into is moving and transferring between the forms of the linear equations. So as you can see here, I have 2 linear equations that are not in slope-intercept form. And I want to put them in slope-intercept form. So I really need my skills from Unit 2 when we talked about literal equations. I need those skills in order to solve these types of problems. So let's remember, we want to get these in the form y equals mx plus b. So let's go ahead and figure out the first one. Let's start by moving the x over to the right-hand side. So I'm going to go ahead and use my equation skills, and I'm going to make sure I show all of my steps as I do so. And I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides. That's going to leave me with 5y on the left and negative 18x on the right. Alrighty, looks good so far. Now, let's go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. That's not correct. My fault. I thought there was an x attached there. Hopefully you caught that. All right, that's going to leave me with negative 15 minus 3x. I don't know why I thought there was an x there. Now, let's go ahead and use that skill that we learned in Unit 2. We're going to divide by 5. My 5s are going to cancel out. Y equals, and I'm going to use that little butterfly method. Do you remember that little thing that we did back in Unit 1? That's going to give me negative 3 minus 3/5 x. You can see that this looks like it's kind of in slope-intercept form, but it's not fully in slope-intercept form, so I need to transfer it so that it is. So I need to move my x in front of that y-intercept. So y equals negative 3/5 x minus 3. So this is going to have an equation that has a slope of negative 3/5 and a y-intercept of negative 3. All right, and the last one here, let's go ahead and put this also in slope-intercept form. Now, let's go ahead and let's get rid of these fractions first, because they're going to make things a little bit confusing here. So let's go ahead and get rid of that 4. I'm going to do that by multiplying both sides of the equation by 4. Watch what that does here. I'm going to multiply 4 by the x to give me 4x. And then this 4 and this 4 are going to cancel out, leaving me with negative y. That's when I distribute into the second piece. And that's going to equal negative 3. Now, I'm not quite done, but what that did was it eliminated all those fractions. Now I can move my pieces. Let's go ahead and move my x's over to the right-hand side. So I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. And that's going to leave me with negative y equals negative 3 minus 4x. And I'm not quite done. I have a negative in front of my y, so I need to divide both sides by negative 1. And I need to do my little butterfly thing again. Y equals, here's my butterfly. Negative 3 divided by negative 1 is positive 3. And then negative 4 divided by negative 1 is positive 4x. And then the last step, put it in full slope-intercept form. So y equals 4x plus 3. So notice it's generating quite a bit of work. Again, stay nice and neat and organized. Alrighty, that brings us to the end of our lesson on slope-intercept form.